Earlier this week, the San Diego Zoo made national headlines as they outlined how they were vaccinating their gorillas against COVID. How did the gorillas become more important than Americans? This is the Closet Conservative Podcast. Yes, it's true. The gorillas at the San Diego Zoo are more important than millions of Americans across the country. The zoo made headlines as they announced that they would be vaccinating their great apes after several had become sick with the virus that causes COVID-19, the coronavirus. The San Diego Union Tribune had the story that there were 9 of their apes that have been vaccinated, and the zoo declined to name exactly how many would be vaccinated before the program was ended. The story was very clear. The vaccine was not labeled for human use, and it was from a supply and a producer of veterinary medications and vaccines, so they had nothing to do with the Pfizer, Moderna, any of those things, which raises some questions in my own mind. But the zoo was taking pride in the fact that they were the first zoo to vaccinate their apes. They talked about the process and how it was similar to humans. And while the zoo may take pride in the story and how they were vaccinating these great apes, as they like to call them, the story really highlights a bigger problem if you think about it. Here we are, celebrating 9 apes receiving a vaccine when there are a million other things going on around our country that we should be focused on. Now, I'm not saying that these animals are not important. Don't take me for that. Don't take me for someone that doesn't appreciate animals. All parts of the ecosystem have their place, and these apes do as well. What I am saying is that this is ridiculous, especially in California, a state that has a governor who continues to force the state to remain in unconstitutional lockdowns. He refuses to follow the science. And that science is that shutdowns are not helping. Compare what is happening in the state of Florida, where the state is completely open and there are no ridiculous mandates. Other states obviously found that as well. Texas and others opened their states up, realizing that these mandates were not helping. They're not doing anything. They're following the science. They're realizing that if you open everything up, you're no worse off than any state with the ridiculous orders. But you're not hearing that on the mainstream media. Instead, you're hearing about Joe Biden saying that the reduction of the orders or the removal of the orders was ridiculous. He used some other terms, but you get what I'm saying. They were covering that, how it was ridiculous they were doing this, but these states are no worse off. And instead of hearing about how these states are doing well and their economies are still thriving and how they're getting people back to work, they're refusing to allow this virus to own their lives, you're going to hear about 9 apes that received a COVID vaccine. Or we could be talking about how Joe Biden is going to spend trillions of dollars for a coronavirus aid package that's going to do little to help Americans. The overwhelming percentage of the package is spent to help pet projects of the Democrats. Trillions of dollars in pork are included in the plan, with Americans receiving just $1,400 of their own money back in return. Yes, you heard me right, own money. This is money that you have paid in, or I guess in theory, you would have paid in if the government had not borrowed it. So they're taking money you have yet to pay in to give you your money in return, but only a small percentage of it. You see, if the left would actually follow the science, they would realize that they are destroying the economy through this package and through their actions. If they would simply reopen the economy and reopen the states and follow that science, there's no need for a stimulus package, if you want to call it that. There's no reason to spend trillions of dollars on a package that does nothing for Americans. We're spending trillions of dollars on a package that does very little to help Americans, and they promote it. We're giving you money. I even read a study that said that this was going to help Americans pay bills through July. Obviously, they have not seen the bills of many Americans in the midst of the pandemic. Obviously, they've not seen the bills of many Americans when things are good. $1,400 for a lot of families doesn't even cover a house payment, their power and water bill. Yet we're sitting here supposed to believe that this is going to cover their bills to July. They're spending billions to address COVID vaccines elsewhere in the world, when we don't have enough vaccines here at home. Billions to help anyone that's willing to hold out their hand and ask for free money. But instead of hearing about that on the mainstream media, covering the ridiculousness of this COVID relief package that is doing nothing for Americans, you're going to hear about how we are vaccinating 9 gorillas in San Diego. Time and again, the left promotes these feel-good stories to try and distract us from what's really going on. In front of our eyes, they have militarized our nation's capital. All around the Capitol, they have these temporary walls. The walls that Democrats fought against, said that walls do not provide protection and have no purpose. They're putting these temporary walls up, as they like to call them, but they're not temporary if they stay permanently, with razor wire to protect the free country's capital. They continue to force people to remain in unconstitutional shutdowns and lockdowns across the country. They refuse to let our economy regain its strength. They truthfully want to destroy the economy and our country as we know it. We see and hear nothing but about how Trump attempted to destroy the country. We hear about how he attempted to overthrow our government on January the 6th. He has tried to overthrow the government. He tried to overthrow the country. He was bad for the country. And we hear constantly how he hurt and destroyed countless lives through his white supremacy and racism. I mean, that's what you hear from the mainstream media and their radical left. But what you don't hear about is how they're destroying our country from within, how they're destroying our country's future, how they're financing everything that we have, because we don't have the money for any of these measures. You don't hear them talking about that. That's not what you hear the mainstream media looking at all. They never want to address the real issues at home. Instead, they choose to focus on pet projects and pork spending. The Democrats have never focused on actually, truly helping Americans. And they're doing all this right in front of our eyes. They're not trying to hide it. All the while, they're sharing these feel-good stories about how they're working hard to help the gorillas in San Diego. You see, they're not trying to hide this behind the story of the gorillas. They're just simply banking on the fact that the majority of Americans simply will not care. If Congress and our government would work half as hard for Americans as they do their pet projects, our country might actually stand a chance to survive. But instead, we're going to go down this path of destruction, down the path of socialism, down the path of communism, as they continue to spend money on things that we do not need, and then tell us stories about how they're saving the gorillas. I hope you all have a great weekend and a great week next week. We'll see you back here next Saturday. The Closet Conservative Podcast is a production of The Liberty Loft. Copyright The Liberty Loft 2021. You can find more shows and information on our website, www.thelibertyloft.com, or on any of our social media channels. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe to the podcast, leave a 5-star review, and share the podcast with your friends.